What? We can't call for emergency services. I hadn't seen Janet in several years. She was holding a young child in her arms, and upon closer inspection, I noticed her belly was significantly swollen. I was so shocked by this sudden turn of events that I couldn't think straight. But I knew I had to help Janet and her family immediately. That's when I decided to shift my focus, and Janet made a certain request. My name is Lillian. I am 60 years old. Currently, I assist my husband, Robert, in his work. Robert is a potter. After graduating from university, I worked as an ordinary office worker. However, I met Robert at a pottery event. The event allowed participants to buy pottery and try their hand at making it. I wasn't interested in pottery, but a poster at the city hall caught my eye, and I decided to attend the event. It was there, at a pottery workshop, that I met Robert. After trying pottery, I, who previously had no interest, became fascinated by it and started visiting Robert's family home to buy his creations. Robert remembered me, and each time I visited his workplace, we enjoyed various conversations. Eventually, our relationship progressed from craftsman and customer to lovers. After dating for 3 years, we got married. Robert told me to do what I wanted, but my interest in pottery grew, and I decided to help him. A factor in my decision to assist Robert was that his parents had retired from pottery when we got married. Then, we had a child. We named her Janet and raised her with lots of love. When Janet was around 3, Robert and I wanted her to take an interest in pottery. We took her to the workshop, let her experience making pottery, and touch the pieces. Janet showed a natural talent for pottery and created amazing pieces. She seemed to realize the joy of pottery and would be overjoyed looking at her own creations. She then immersed herself in pottery and started asking to make dinner plates, which meant bowls. Seeing Janet like this made me smile. As she grew, she expressed a desire to take over the family business, and I felt optimistic about the future. Robert, who had taken several apprentices after taking over the family business, found them all kind, and they were supportive of Janet eventually working there. After high school, Janet went to university to study not only pottery but also different culture, history, and arts. On holidays and free days from university, she helped with the family business, honing her skills. Her skills, nurtured by Robert since her childhood, had grown impressively. However, she never became complacent. She worked with her fellow apprentices, saying, "I want to spread pottery more." 5 years after graduating from university, as Janet approached her 30s, I realized how quickly children grow up. Then one day, Janet made a surprising announcement. "Mom, I'm going to get married." "What? You're getting married?" I was so surprised by the sudden announcement of her marriage that I raised my voice without realizing it. Janet had a boyfriend since her university days. I had thought that if there were no problems, she would marry her current boyfriend. But hearing it face to face took me by surprise, and I was at a loss for words. Janet's boyfriend's name is Alex. I had spoken to him several times and had a very good impression of him. Later, Janet told me various stories about how their relationship led to marriage. It seems the first proposal came around the time she graduated from university. Initially, she declined because she wanted to continue working in the family pottery business and needed more time. Alex respected her wishes and proposed several times, not immediately but after giving her space. Years passed, and Janet was at a point where she felt she needed to make a decision. One day, browsing social media, she saw photos of her classmates holding their children. She felt they looked happy and thought to herself, "I should get married too." Janet shared this with me. "All my classmates are married with kids." I felt like I was the only one not married. After thinking it over, I decided I really want to marry Alex. Is that so? Your father, and I won't say anything if that's what you've decided. Thank you. Janet accepted Alex's proposal but had a few requests for him. One was to continue working as she did before marriage. Another was not to have children for a while. While her classmates' photos with their children seemed happy, she wanted to maintain her current lifestyle even after marriage. Alex agreed with Janet's perspective, and they decided to marry. However, I knew their new life would be very different from before, and Janet might face challenges. They planned to live near our house, so I wanted to support them as much as I could. If you ever have any trouble, make sure you tell me, okay? Thank you. I will. It was a new experience for me to have my child getting married, and I felt a bit overwhelmed when I first heard the news. But after listening to Janet's thoughts, I felt relieved knowing she had considered it well. I hoped Janet would have a happy married life. However, after the marriage, I would come to know Alex's true nature, and their happy life would begin to crumble. Janet moved out and started living with Alex. She visited her parents' home almost every day, so the relationship felt no different than before marriage. About 6 months after Janet and Alex got married, I was suddenly informed they were moving far away. Alex had been assigned a transfer, which was the reason. Apparently, Alex knew about the transfer possibility before marrying Janet but had kept it hidden. I didn't know why he hid it, but I guessed he thought Janet might leave him if she knew. The moment I heard this, I began to distrust Alex. I also doubted whether he truly considered Janet's feelings. Are you okay? Maybe he could go alone on assignment. It's awkward to say this, but he said he couldn't do it without me. I wanted to continue my work. I suggested it, but I thought I'd listen to Alex's request this time since he has accommodated my wishes so far. I see. If Janet had decided, there was nothing I could do. I refrained from saying more. A few days after Janet's report, she and Alex moved out. I was engulfed in sadness, realizing they were truly gone. The apprentices who had spent time with us also couldn't hide their sadness. Janet's presence had indeed been significant. Half a year passed. One day, our peaceful life was interrupted by a call from Janet. She informed us that she had a new addition to her family. This child was our first grandchild. While I felt joy, several questions crossed my mind. Half a year ago, when Janet moved, she must have already been pregnant. She had said she didn't want children immediately, but perhaps her thoughts changed. Why did she decide to have a child despite the upcoming move? My suspicions about her husband, Alex, grew stronger. Are you okay? I'm worried about Alex. Alex?
Yeah.
I'm fine. I see. If Janet says she's fine, then I couldn't press further. I told her she could always come back home and ended the call. When I mentioned Alex to my husband, Robert, he also seemed unable to shake off his distrust. However, since Janet said there were no problems, we concluded that it wasn't our place to interfere. We thought about staying in touch and going to their house if necessary. But after the call about the birth of the grandchild, Janet's contact stopped. Worried, I tried calling again, and Alex answered. Oh, Alex? Where's Janet? Janet's in the bath right now. Okay, understood. Even when I called Janet during the day, no one answered. So I tried again at night, and again Alex picked up. He said Janet was in the bath again, which puzzled me because I was calling her mobile. Why is Janet never there? No one answers in the daytime either. Well, she's in the bath. I don't know about the daytime. I was shocked by his defiant tone and lost for words. Taking advantage of my silence, Alex hung up. I tried contacting them several times after, but Alex always said things like, "The baby is crying, please stop calling," or, "Aren't you being persistent?" His defiant attitude led him to reveal the reason. Actually, Janet said she doesn't want to be involved with you anymore. Can you please stop calling? What? Why? Is that really what she said? She wanted to get away from your strict pottery teaching. She's happy to be free now. That can't be. She doesn't answer during the day because she doesn't want to talk to you. Please understand. Stunned and silent, Alex continued. Don't you get it from my attitude? You're being annoying. Please don't contact us anymore. If you say so. We didn't know Janet was suffering. Don't contact us ever again. After the call, I was dumbfounded. I couldn't hear Janet's voice and felt enveloped in loneliness. The next day, I tried calling again in the daytime, but it seemed like I was blocked. Alex must have said it. Was Janet really afraid of us? This thought saddened me. When I told my husband, he also looked sad. Then maybe it's better we don't interfere. Yes. To think Janet was suffering. We decided to cut off contact with her. 4 years passed. Our family business was doing well, and the sales of our works were thriving. My husband and I, along with our apprentices, were delighted with the increased income and accomplishments. The apprentices gradually became independent, and new faces joined us. Someone emerged to take over our work, which relieved us. We haven't forgotten Janet from our hearts. We care for her every day but have decided to refrain from contacting her to avoid scaring her. Then, one day, a shocking event occurred. It was on a day of a big storm. A massive storm hit our area, forcing us to close our work. For the first time in a while, my husband and I had time to spend together at home without thinking about work. It was around 1 a.m., and Robert and I were in our bedroom. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, waking us up. Wondering who could be visiting at such an hour, Robert, who had also been awakened by the sound of the doorbell, turned on the light and looked at my face. Who could it be, at this hour? Really, who could it be? As the doorbell continued to ring, we apprehensively headed towards the entrance. Gathering courage, Robert opened the door, and there stood an unexpected person. Mom, Dad. Janet. Unbelievably, Janet was there. In her arms, she held an unconscious girl. Probably our granddaughter. She was barely breathing, but clearly in a critical state. Looking closer, it appeared Janet was also pregnant. Janet, are you pregnant? Yes, 9 months. The situation was dangerous for the fetus too. I thought we should go to the hospital before asking for more details. Please call an ambulance. Please. When Janet asked, Robert initially refused. What? We can't call an ambulance. I was shocked, but only for a moment. Robert then spoke gently to Janet again. In this severe typhoon, we don't know when an ambulance can come. I'll drive you to the emergency room. However, Robert had already had some alcohol. Therefore, I prepared the car and took Janet and her daughter to the hospital. A few minutes later, we arrived, and they were examined. It turned out Janet and her daughter were severely malnourished. Both were admitted to the hospital. Fortunately, there was no impact on the baby. I thought the best thing was for them to receive treatment at the hospital and recover. We could ask about the circumstances later. Janet had dark circles under her eyes, clearly from lack of sleep. It was unclear what had happened at her new home, but she seemed mentally strained. I decided to quietly wait for her to wake up. It was just past 11 a.m. when Janet finally woke up. Mom. Janet. She must have had enough sleep as her complexion seemed slightly better than yesterday. But of course, we couldn't let our guard down yet. I called the nurse to inform them that Janet had woken up. After the doctor's examination was over, and Janet was back in her room, I spoke to her. Janet. Are you okay? I knew she wasn't okay, but I was unsure how to start the conversation. When I spoke carefully, trying not to frighten her, Janet started talking with a smile. Yes, I'm okay. Thank you. That's good to hear. I must have surprised you and Dad. I'm sorry for the trouble. We were surprised, but we don't think it's a bother at all. Janet didn't seem to be afraid of me. In fact, she seemed relieved. After that, I let Janet lie down in bed and continued talking. Janet was my and Robert's daughter before she was Alex's wife. Why had she returned home in such a terrible state? Why had she come back so late at night? There were many things I was curious about, but I also felt maybe I shouldn't probe too deeply. So, I decided to wait until Janet was ready to talk on her own. We just had to accept that we might not hear anything. I wanted to respect Janet's feelings, whatever they were. A few days passed. Janet seemed to be regaining her health and was smiling more than before. I felt relieved recalling the awkwardness of our first meeting after several years. It seemed like she had opened her heart to us in just a few days. One day, Robert and I went to Janet's hospital room together. She looked serious. Despite wondering what was wrong, we acted normally. Janet was smiling as usual, but something was clearly different. I wondered if she was okay. As I thought this, Janet, with a serious look, began to speak. Can I talk about what happened after the move? I hadn't expected her to be willing to talk. Robert and I were surprised, but it seemed Janet was ready to share. If you're okay with it, we'd like to hear. Okay. Thank you. With our response, Janet began to tell her story. What she said was so shocking, it was hard to believe. And it became clear that Alex was a terrible man. Janet had accepted his proposal initially. They had been in a relationship for a long time. And she thought she knew everything about Alex. However, she only learned his true nature after marriage. Alex was extremely possessive, wanting Janet to focus only on him. He cut her off from all her friends, forbade her from working, and even from going outside the house. He took away her smartphone, cutting off all her external communications. The last contact she made was to inform me about the birth of her child. Right before her phone was confiscated. I wondered why she didn't seek help from me, her mother. Because, as it turned out, Janet didn't think she could get help. Alex had convinced Janet that we, her parents, disliked her and that she could only rely on him. Shocked by these words, Janet became afraid to talk to us. Additionally, there were many restrictions in her daily life. She wasn't allowed adequate sleep, and her meals were limited to one slice of bread per day. She was only allowed out of her room for set times to use the bathroom or shower. I can't imagine being in such a situation. But just hearing about it made me feel how deeply Janet was distressed. The reason she finally escaped was because of her child, who was weekly sleeping next to her. She realized she couldn't continue to let her child live this way because of her lack of courage. Janet thought it didn't matter what happened to herself. But she wanted her child to have a normal life. She pondered various things, but ultimately decided that escape was her only option. Even if she believed we wouldn't welcome her, she resolved to return home and seek our help. Once she made up her mind, things moved quickly. Janet sneaked out of the house, catching the last train to come home. After hearing Janet's story, everything made sense. To confirm, we asked her if she was afraid of us, but her answer was no. I was lying to you and Dad, wasn't I? Yes, when you hear such words, it's easy to believe them. I'm sorry we didn't realize. Janet shook her head again after hearing my words. We then decided to report the matter to the police. A female officer came to the hospital room to hear the details. The police took the situation seriously. When they visited Janet's former residence, they found no one there. Alex had probably panicked and left to search for Janet and their child. when he realized they had escaped. We didn't know when or where Alex might appear in front of Janet and her child. Therefore, the police increased patrols around our home and the hospital. Weeks passed. Janet, coincidentally nearing her delivery date, gave birth and then was discharged from the hospital. The child was born very healthy, which was a relief for all of us. After everyone was discharged from the hospital safely, we started living in our family home. For a while, we left the family business in the hands of our apprentices. And Robert stayed at home, which was reassuring. We still couldn't let our guard down completely. But it was heartwarming to see Janet smiling again. We hope to continue living this happy life if possible. However, reality proved to be more challenging. One peaceful afternoon, while Janet and I were preparing lunch, we heard a noise from the second floor. No one was supposed to be upstairs at that time. Robert, who had been relaxing on the sofa, also heard the noise and said, "I'll go check upstairs," and went up. We had never been cautious about noises before. But after what happened with Janet, we were living with heightened vigilance every day. I told Janet and my grandchild to stay close to me while watching the situation. I was holding my smartphone in my hand, ready to call for help if needed. I hoped Robert would come back safely. As I was thinking this, I heard a shouting voice from upstairs. "Hey! You! What are you doing here?" Someone had broken into the house, and Robert was confronting them. I immediately called the police. Later, Robert told me what had happened. When he went upstairs and quietly entered the room where the noise was coming from, he found Alex there. Alex seemed surprised to see Robert. Why are you here? How did you get in?" "Shut up. Where's Janet?" "She's here, isn't she? I came to take her back. I won't let her be with people like you. Calm down a bit." Silence. Alex was extremely agitated and lunged at Robert. Robert managed to restrain Alex. And just as he was wondering how to let us downstairs know to call the police arrived. It was a tense situation just hearing about it. When the police were taking Alex away, he saw Janet and shouted at her. "Why did you betray me, Janet? I love you so much. Why? I only came today to take you back." Alex's love for Janet was completely distorted. Thinking about Janet receiving that kind of love for so long filled me with an unbearable feeling. Janet looked sadly on. After that, Alex was charged with multiple crimes, including breaking and entering, unlawful imprisonment, and preparation for murder, as he was found with a knife intended to harm Robert and me. I don't know what kind of life Alex had lived, but I suspect something in his childhood might have led to such distorted expressions of love. However, I heard that his parents had already passed away. What happened to Alex is known only to him. Months passed, and Alex was convicted and sent to prison. We could be at ease for a while. However, given Alex's strong obsession, he might still look for Janet after his release. We discussed within the family what we could do before that happens. Currently, we continue to live happily in our family home. Janet has started enjoying pottery again, immersing herself in crafting whenever she feels like it. Our grandchild, initially wary of us, has gradually opened up, playing and helping out while Janet works on her pottery. Having been separated as a family for a long time, it's truly heartwarming that we can once again enjoy meals together with smiles. Our hearts are warmed by the notion of family, and I have one wish: to protect the smiles of our family in the future.